Tutankhamun, the Curse of King Tut, what's real and what's fake. In 1922, deep in Egypt's famous Valley of the Kings, one discovery changed history forever. British archaeologist Howard Carter had spent years searching for the lost tomb of a young pharaoh named Tutankhamun. Most people believed the tomb had already been looted or destroyed long ago. Even Carter's sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, was about to give up funding the project. But in November 1922, Carter's team uncovered something incredible: a staircase buried under the desert sand. Those steps led to a sealed doorway covered in ancient Egyptian symbols. When Carter saw the name Tutankhamun written on the entrance, he knew he had found something extraordinary. He carefully made a small hole in the door and held up a candle to look inside. What he saw was unbelievable. Gold, statues, jewelry, and treasures shining in the darkness, untouched for nearly 3,000 years. When Carnarvon asked him, "Can you see anything?" Carter gave the famous reply, "Yes, wonderful things." The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb became one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. Inside were thousands of priceless artifacts, including the golden mask that would later become one of the most famous symbols of ancient Egypt. Overnight, Tutankhamun became the most famous pharaoh in the world. But along with excitement and treasure, a darker story began to spread, one that would become even more famous than the tomb itself. This was the legend of the Curse of King Tut. Soon after the tomb was opened, newspapers around the world published a terrifying warning. The most famous line was, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the tomb of the pharaoh." The meaning was clear: anyone who entered the tomb would soon die. This created fear and panic, and people began to believe the tomb was protected by an ancient supernatural curse. But the strange part is that historians and Egyptologists have never found solid evidence that this curse was actually written inside the tomb. There are no official excavation records, no confirmed photographs, and no clear proof that such an inscription existed. Many experts believe this quote was either exaggerated or completely invented by journalists to make the story more dramatic. Still, the curse story became much stronger in 1923, when Lord Carnarvon suddenly died, only a few months after the tomb was opened. According to reports, Carnarvon had been bitten by a mosquito. Later, while shaving, he accidentally cut the bite, causing it to become infected. In the 1920s, antibiotics did not exist, and infections could become deadly very quickly. Carnarvon developed blood poisoning and pneumonia and died in Cairo. From a medical point of view, his death had a logical explanation, but the media immediately linked it to the curse. Newspapers claimed that at the exact moment Carnarvon died, the lights in Cairo mysteriously went out. Another rumor spread that back in England, his dog began howling loudly and then suddenly died. Whether these details were real or exaggerated is still unclear, but they sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. And to the public, it felt like proof. After that, the legend grew rapidly, where whenever anyone connected to the tomb later became sick or died, people called them another victim of the curse. Newspapers began making lists of individuals who had visited the tomb and later passed away. The story became stronger with every tragedy. Slowly, Tutankhamun stopped being seen as just a king. He became a mysterious and terrifying figure, almost like a spirit taking revenge on those who disturbed him. However, when researchers studied the facts, the curse story began to fall apart. The most important detail is that Howard Carter, the man who discovered the tomb and spent the most time inside it, did not die mysteriously. In fact, Carter lived for 17 more years and died naturally in 1939. If a supernatural curse truly existed, Carter should have been the first person to suffer. Instead, he lived a normal life. Not only Carter, but many other people who entered the tomb also lived for decades. Some lived into their 70s and 80s. This proved that the claim everyone who entered the tomb died was not true. Yes, a few people did die in the years after the discovery, but the media mainly focused on deaths that sounded dramatic, while ignoring the many people who survived. So if it wasn't magic, what was the real reason behind these deaths? Scientists believe that ancient tombs can contain real dangers. A sealed chamber closed for thousands of years can trap mold, fungus, bacteria, and even toxic gases. When the tomb is opened, these particles spread into the air and can be inhaled. One fungus often mentioned is aspergillus, which can cause serious lung infections, especially in people with weak immune systems. Lord Carnarvon already had poor health, which may have made him more vulnerable. So the tomb may have played a role, but not through magic, through biology. Another important factor is that medicine in the 1920s was not advanced. Diseases like pneumonia and blood infections were far more deadly back then. Today, such conditions are often treatable, but at that time, they could easily kill. So some of the deaths connected to the tomb may have been nothing more than coincidence. But humans naturally search for patterns. When something happens after a major event, people connect it. Once the curse story became popular, every death seemed like confirmation. Fear made the myth stronger. The curse legend also became famous because Western culture was already obsessed with mummy stories. Even before Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered, books and movies often showed ancient Egyptian mummies coming back for revenge. People already believed Egypt was a land of mystery, magic, and curses. So when Carnarvon died, it felt like fiction had become reality. The media took advantage of this and turned the discovery into one of the biggest mysteries of the century. Today, most historians agree that there is no real evidence of a supernatural curse. The famous curse quote has no confirmed source inside the tomb, and many people involved in the excavation lived long lives. However, it is true that tombs can contain real health hazards, such as mold and bacteria. In that sense, a scientific curse is possible, but the supernatural version was mostly media exaggeration. So was King Tut's curse real or fake? If we talk about magic, the curse was almost certainly fake, built from fear, coincidence, and dramatic journalism. But if we talk about real dangers hidden inside an ancient sealed tomb, then yes, there may have been genuine risks. And maybe that is why this story is still famous today, because it combines history, treasure, mystery, and fear. Tutankhamun's golden mask is now known worldwide, and his tomb remains one of the greatest discoveries ever made. Curse or no curse, Tutankhamun achieved immortality, and perhaps the real curse was never about death. Maybe the real curse is that once you hear the story of King Tut, you can never forget it.